Hello, I'm Elisabeth. Welcome to Hungary. Behind me is the bend in the Danube, where the nomadic Magyar horsemen first came out of the steppes of Russia, kicked off their riding boots, and beat their sabres into plowshares. From up here on the ramparts of Budapest, Roman centurions kept watch against the fierce tribesmen who brought down their empire. The descendants of those tribesmen still till the land today. These long-armed pumps still provide the farmsteads and their domestic animals with all the water they need. Kindling is precious. The horsemen of the Buda earn their living these days putting on shows for the tourists. But the tradition of horsemanship goes back to the days of the nomadic herdsmen, when skill on a horse was the essential of survival. The Magyars were not only swift and brave, they were well armed. Their iron-tipped arrows were the exocets of their day. Their larder was on the hoof and there for the taking. And they were not averse, when times were lean, to eating the slower of their mounts. Some of the herdsmen settled down as fishermen, hunting the wide, slow waters of the Danube and its mighty tributary, the Tisza. I'd been invited by the Nagy brothers, river fishermen like their father and grandfather before them, to sample the famous Szeged fish soup, a kind of paprika-spiced freshwater bouillabaisse. First, we have to check the nets for our basic ingredients. We hope for a haul which will form the basis of the soup. The rivers of Hungary used to be famous for fish, so thick with sturgeon and other delicacies that the fishermen had no need to bait their iron hooks. The fish, it was said, just shouldered their way onto the lines. We don't seem to be having the same kind of luck with our nets. We have just enough fish. They're kept alive in a wooden keep box towed behind us. River fish have a great many bones, which makes them excellent for soup, but not so good for eating whole. A nice little mixed bunch. Pike, pike perch, tench, roach, bream. The fishermen's Magyar ancestors travelled light, carrying everything with them as they went. We only had to come down the path. And that's all we need: salt, ground paprika, and a tube of paprika paste. And plenty of chopped onions. One for each 2 people who are going to eat the soup. In case there wasn't much fish, we've hedged our bets with a special treat, farmed mirror carp. Mirror carp are a staple all over Eastern Europe, sold live from tanks in the markets. It was the monasteries who first bred this captive variety and kept them in their ponds as a living store cupboard for fast days. The river fish have been cooked in water and strained out of the broth. In goes the carp and the chopped onions. They're not fried first. This is a bograx, the nomad's iron cooking pail. This would have been slung across the horseman's saddle, ready to be hammered back into arrowheads in as long as it took to build a cooking fire. Plenty of salt. Freshwater fish have no natural salt. Time for the paprika paste, the magic ingredient. And let it simmer for 30 to 40 minutes. Paprika was the peasant's pepper in former days, a homegrown substitute for the expensive Eastern spice. It went into the fisherman's stew long before it graced the tables of the rich. The expert nostril and well-honed palate finds the stew nearing perfection. Nearly ready. Where would a nomad be without a bit of migration? And I should explain, we're not in army uniform. Hungarian work clothes come in two colors, green or blue, and that's it. Some people have a barbecue, but in Szeged, you have a bograks table, a refinement of the old Magyar habit of sitting round the communal cooking pot. I've given my helping an extra kick with chili sauce. Easy to make. We just mixed a ladleful of soup with a spoonful of hot paprika. Spicy, and it has an added bonus in these mosquito-breeding marshes. Paprika has anti-malarial properties, bestowing a degree of immunity discovered when the Suez Canal was being built. The paprika-eating Hungarian shrugged off the fever, where many others died. Quite bony, but delicious. In the old days, the bograks went straight onto the floor of the kitchen in winter and the yard in summer. And everyone sat around on stools, eating straight from the pot with wooden spoons. We're much more elegant. Paprika was known as Turkish pepper, as it was introduced to Hungary by the Ottomans. The scarlet spice proved so popular in addition to the Magyar stew pot that it was soon commercially milled. Here, the cone-shaped pods are harvested in the autumn when they're perfectly ripe, dried carefully and fed into the machines for grinding. The paprika millers discovered that by removing the seeds and the membrane, which contains the hot element, they could mill mild paprika and control the degree of heat in the powder. Just in time to replace the supplies of black pepper from the east, cut off during the Napoleonic Wars. More recently this century, a new strain of Capsicum annuum was bred, which had practically none of the fire and was much more suitable for automated processing. These days, the paprika of Koloksa is famous far beyond the borders of Hungary. Each consignment is ground to order to suit local tastes. This is pimenton, destined for Spain. But don't tell the Spaniards, they think they invented it. People still plant a supply of paprika peppers for home consumption. Young plants begin under plastic. The frosts of spring claim more casualties than a peasant economy can afford. Paprika is the peasant cure-all, loaded with vitamin C to ward off winter colds. The first capsicums were brought back to Europe from the New World by Columbus's ship surgeon for their medicinal rather than gastronomic properties. And of course, bacon and paprika is the perfect combination. Bacon and ham has to be well smoked. A damp climate demands a good smoking to back up the salting and drying. Tamalme is going to show me how to make chicken paprikas, a rich man's treat. Young chickens don't often get relegated to the peasant pot. They are far too valuable as egg layers. We need plenty of onions, about half the weight of onions to chicken. The paprikas must be cooked with lard. This gives the stew its characteristic flavor. The chicken has to be neatly jointed. You can make it with an old boiler past its egg-producing days. Which reminds me, there's an old saying, when a Hungarian peasant kills a chicken, either the peasant is sick or the chicken. We're cooking enough for 8. In go the onions. They just soften in the lard, but don't brown. A gas flame replaces the traditional campfire. And salt. And the paprika. The chicken will dampen down the heat. It needs about an hour's slow simmering in its own steam. with pure, clear water as the cooking broth. Hungarian cooks prefer water to stock or wine. The clue is in the barrel. We're in Hungary, all right, but it's the wine which will go into the stew which gives away the secret. We are among Swabians. 250 years ago, this German-speaking community was imported lock, stock, and more important, barrel, by Kaloksa's Roman Catholic bishop. The Swabians set up home on one side of the valley, planted their vines in the middle, and dug storage chambers for the wine barrels into the escarpment opposite. Soon the vintners had turned their cellars into men-only drinking dens. But that's the difference, a glass or two of red wine in the stew. Just a touch of garlic. Stefan has been simmering his stew for a couple of hours. It's a real ragu of a dish. Magyar herdsman's beef, cooked in the brokraks, with a Swabian special touch. A spoonful of salt, and a couple of bay leaves, a little hot paprika, and plenty of the mild. The hot stuff is reckoned to have aphrodisiac qualities. The cellars were convenient for entertaining ladies who were not necessarily anyone's wife. I'm keeping firmly on my side of the valley. The chicken is tender now, but it needs to cook down until almost all the liquid has evaporated. Over here, Tamalme is mixing up a batch of gulashka, noodle dumplings, perfect to sog up the delicious paprika gravy. Eggs mixed with flour to make the simplest of pasta doughs. Add a bit more flour and a splash of water to make up for the extra guest. Then push the mixture through the large holes of a draining spoon into a pot of boiling water. Give it a few minutes, drain, continue till all the mixture is used up. Simple. And a lot quicker than going down to the pasta shop. A fine plate of Swabian Magyar stew, a glass of wine, and who needs ladies anyway?
In einem schönen Abend, am hellen Sonnenschein, ich lieb sie nur allein. Sie hat zwei blaue Augen, ein rosenrotes Sinn. Sie spielt mit Sakett in der dunkle Abendstund.
Our paprikas is ready.
Bravo, Parvács. Így van.
Bravo! Bravo! Prost, dass die Gurgel nicht verrost.
Alles Gute. Hello.
These isolated farmsteads were set up almost by accident, after the peasantry had been forced out of its villages and into the fortified towns during the Turkish occupation. The pushta, the name means barren, was gradually irrigated, the sand stabilized with plantings, and what was once a windy, inhospitable plain is now the breadbasket of Hungary. People used to hatch goose eggs under the nesting stalk, 3 at a time. Lucky for some. The reeds from the marshes have many uses. This 80-year-old great-grandmother has been weaving her rushes into fine, strong baskets ever since she learned her craft as a young girl. Such cottage industries, using homegrown materials and inherited skills, produce a useful peasant cash crop with no overheads. All you need is a fine old loom, strong fingers, and more than 60 years of practice. Basket weaving is one of the most ancient crafts of the countryside. In the old days, such baskets were used not only for carrying goods to and from the market, but as containers to store seed, carry grain for sowing, doing double duty as a lunch pail for field workers. The handle is skillfully braided and woven into the warp for extra strength. And I have a fine basket to take on my way. Some have such fame they can stay at home and their customers come to them. Others have to take their wares to the city to earn the cash crop. The women of certain villages are famous for their fine embroideries, and a lively market in their wares has been established on the tourist run through Budapest Fisherman's Bastion. The colors, stitches, and images on these glorious embroideries are the visible evidence of a highly individual history, not just national identity, but the identity of each village, even of each household, each of whose designs differs, however subtly, from its neighbors. Each shape is a formalization of a natural image: flowers, hearts, horseshoes, even paprika. The older designs are the edge and line embroideries. White thread for some, blue, black and red the traditional colors for others. The glamorous multicolored flowers are more Johnny-come-lately. Over there on the east bank is the busy young city of Pest, with the neo-Gothic Parliament building at its heart. Over here are more venerable stones, old Buda's crowning glory, officially the Church of Our Lady, but known to everyone as Matthias Templum. Matthias was Hungary's Renaissance monarch, a scholar king who presided over the Magyar Golden Age and had the good sense to marry an Italian princess, who brought her cooks with her as her dowry, adding art to fine eating, already the national passion. The marketplace was once a busy Ottoman souk. There are wooden spoons and wooden spoons. This must be the mother of them all. Irresistible. Everyone who's ever stirred a pot over an open fire and got their fingers burnt should have one. It's been cold and wintry this April, and flowering willow is the first sign of spring. We all need it. Plum brandy made on the farm. This should keep out the cold. The Muslim Turks were forbidden wine, but distilled liquor was different. It hadn't specifically been prohibited by the Prophet, as it hadn't been invented at the time. Honey, because I love it in my coffee. Coffee was one of the more positive Turkish legacies. I might have some of this fresh curd cheese. I could stuff a strudel with it, another Turkish legacy, Ottoman phyllo pastry, to wrap the dumpling.
Nyugodtan kérdezze meg, mi ilyen drága banán. Megmondjuk.
And this year's paprika. It's still green and yellow, lovely when it's fresh. There's a two-way traffic between city and countryside. Last year's plantings are sold, and seeds for this year's planting replace them. And you can buy your eastern spices too, and dried herbs to keep the stores going until the new crop is ready. The herbs are native to Europe, but the spices are expensive because they have to be imported, luxuries. No wonder paprika and chili became so popular. I'm after some homemade sauerkraut, well matured in the barrel since the fields were cleared before the frosts of winter. This is nostalgic stuff. Plum jam, made without sugar, cooked right down so thick it's like black toffee. Town dwellers who were once country children remember stirring the huge copper pans of fruit, which bubbled and puffed for hours over a wide bed of coals in the orchard each autumn. A glass of Tokai wine and a piece of salty bread to restore my strength. The Hungarian recipe for happiness, I'm told, is wine, wheat, peace, and a beautiful wife or a handsome husband. Markets attract entertainers, storytellers and traveling musicians, old traditions and new images, or at least the stuffed version, and music to jog ancestral memories. The city may forget, but country memories are long. After the Russian tanks crushed the uprising of 1956, the young people of Budapest, searching for ways to resist Kremlinization, took up folk dancing as a subtle way to express the forbidden national identity, and went out to the villages to learn again the songs and steps of their grandparents. They came back and set up folk dance houses like this one, sandwiched between apartments in a modern building in Budapest. A kind of underground network where anyone could come and learn the old ways. Not so long ago, this was a subversive activity. In these more liberal times, the folk dance house provides a popular Saturday evening out. Dresses come as you are, and everyone is welcome. Those who have learned the steps and tunes can pass on their knowledge. The boys get a chance to show off their skill in front of the girls. And the old people have a moment to remember how things used to be. And the rest of us have a chance to learn old traditions. Down this end, we're all beginners together.